You guys imagine that those fans are totally reasonable and content about losing a couple times this season?
No, no. But they're back. I mean,
Are they? Because they're still, by percentage, they are unlikely to make the playoff, correct? Just simply by percentage, I assume that a 3-win SEC or 3-loss SEC team is going to get in.
They've only lost 2 games, right? So are you saying like they're going to lose in the SEC
I'm
championship
assuming
game?
that a 3-loss SEC team might get in anyway because of the regard that people just have for the SEC.
I was going to say like the playoff percentages, it's a committee that picks who's in. So ESPN all season, they've been putting these like, this team has a 60% chance of getting in if they do this or that. People are deciding this. What are they putting the percentage? I understand that there is like an algorithm that they've built that is predicting what they think will be the threshold for teams to get in based off their records and their schedules and how many games they've won and lost. But people are choosing this. And so there is a human element of brand favoritism in the college football playoff selection. We obviously saw it last year when Alabama got in over Florida State after Florida State's quarterback got hurt. But I don't understand how you can put a percentage on that.
Well, I don't either because I don't know what the algorithm is that they're using. And I assume that what they're doing with strength of schedule and everything else is giving you as many metrics as they can that are going to be put in front of the committee. And then the committee will decide with all that data. But the thing that I wanted to ask you guys, because in this room and I think throughout America, you have 2 different kinds of people when it comes to this sport, which is, yes, I'm interested. I enjoy it every week. And tell me who's going to be playing at the end. I'll argue about it then. And those people think the SEC is simply what it's always been. And then there are the people who are really in the weeds on watching everything that's happening every weekend, analyzing it, deconstructing the numbers of it. And those people continue to tell me that the people who aren't watching with the same dedication are appraising the SEC in a way that's more favorable than the SEC actually is when you watch the games played. The people who think they're more informed are telling you at every turn that the SEC isn't what you think it is.
They can go to hell, okay? I don't care what they think, what they want. I want the matchups that I want. I want big brands in the college football playoff. I want Mississippi. I want Alabama. I want Tennessee. I want Georgia. I want Texas. I want Texas A&M.
Mississippi a big brand?
It's an SEC team. Like, I take them
so
over.
That's a big. So then all of the SEC teams are a big brand if Mississippi's a big brand.
I mean, for the most part, I'm leaving out LSU. But I want the biggest teams and the biggest brands in the college football playoff. That's what I want. What anyone else wants, that's up to them. But I'm telling you what I want, Dan. I want to see matchups that we rarely see in a postseason environment in college football.
You're emblematic of the problem in the media, which is they're name brands because they've been around. It's the whole system is gamed for people to put out rankings at the beginning of the year and refuse to capitulate on them being wrong at the beginning of the year. And most people are working from it as the SEC is the best conference in America. I'll concede, I think it is the best conference in America, but I think it can simultaneously be the best conference in America and overrated according to its present day reputation, which was built on the 2010s when they were running everything and playing a totally different sport and having a full monopoly over it. Look, the ACC straight up has a chance to be better than 500 head-to-head against the SEC this year. The SEC has had plenty of bad losses, but for whatever reason, a loss inside the SEC with voters is considered a better loss than a loss inside a conference in other divisions. I am curious, though, what your thoughts are on what Lane Kiffin volunteered, which is there's this general notion amongst coaches, which is we don't want to make the SEC championship game. We can lose that SEC championship game, and it could maybe hurt us.
Get the bye, too, is what he wants. He's like, I want the bye.
Well, he's like, the risk of the bye doesn't outweigh potentially losing that because there is this fear. The source on the College Football Playoff Committee not penalizing you for making your conference championship game is just trust me, bro. Because if a team gets blown out in their conference title game, that is going to stay with you. These are humans making this decision. And here's another scenario in which it might actually hurt you making that conference championship game. An extra game, you shouldn't, in my mind, it shouldn't hurt you for making your conference championship game. That's an extra game that you play. But what if you suffer an injury? What if the Jordan Travis thing happens to you inside that conference championship game? The committee has already shown us that they will hold that against you.
Well, as far as the conference college football playoff arguments have gone, it's gotten so toxic so quickly. And yes, we all saw this coming, but I'm struck by the fact that we're on like week 2 and everyone it's like Big Ten fans versus SEC fans, and everyone's super angry at each other. But to go back to the conference championship point, this is something that like people have brought this up since they announced the 12-team playoff, because there are teams that aren't going to play that weekend that'll get the extra week of rest that took care of business but didn't make it into the conference championship. And the conferences are so big and they are so top heavy, especially in the Big Ten, where the scheduling has Indiana playing Ohio State, but they don't have to play Penn State this year. They don't have to play Oregon this year, where, yeah, it's probably better for Indiana if they lose to Ohio State, don't play in the conference championship game, and then make the playoff.
But they have to lose a close game to Ohio State.
I don't
right?
think so.
I think they do.
Think
if they get blown out, they're not getting in.
I think that's subjective. But I think that's also, like, Indiana fans, if you tell them that, they're not going to be very happy with you for saying that, Stugotz, because they've won more of their games than the SEC teams that are going to get in over them.
I think anybody can beat anybody that is going to be named to the college football playoff. I think it's wide open, and I think it's great. But whatever happens in that final is going to be confirmation bias. They're going to give more lotto tickets to the SEC, and there may be one ACC team in there. And because the SEC has 3 times the opportunities to win the title, everybody will point to it and say, see, best conference in America. What I'm afraid of is let's play this out. SMU. Let's say they run the table for the rest of the year. Let's say BYU ends up being Big 12 champions. SMU goes to the ACC championship game against Miami and say they lose. Then their 2 losses are potentially to 2 teams inside the CFP that have buys. The committee's going to look at a 2-loss SMU now because they've lost in a conference championship game, and potentially a 3-loss SEC team. And I've got zero faith that they're going to look at that rationally and not apply their biases here.
The SEC team, you're not incentivized to miss the conference championship because you'll get a bye, but if you win the SEC championship, you get a playoff bye. So you advance further, and you're going to have to play those teams in the playoffs anyways.
Here's with Lane's point, they won't punish the runner-up in the SEC. The SEC doesn't have to worry about that. I get where he's thinking. I get where it's really hard for humans to deprogramming help me out here. Deprogramming themselves here.
Deprogram.
If they see a team blown out in that conference championship game,
It's
I
funny
really
everyone
did.
said it at the same time.
I'm sorry about that. I watched Megalopolis last night, and it really just messed with me in my head.
I do think, Billy, like maybe it depends. Maybe it depends. Like
it
how...
depends on your conference too, right? Because like there's conferences that like you wouldn't get an automatic bye, and if you're not in the conference championship, you're probably not going to get in.
Well, no conference gets an automatic bye. I think there is some confusion about the power conferences getting the 4 bye weeks. If Boise State or Tulane or whoever the highest ranked G5 champion is higher ranked than the Big 12 champion or the ACC champion, which like theoretically could happen right now because there may be a 2 or 3 loss champion in one of those conferences. They could get the bye week, which I think would be like just confusing for a lot of people that thought that was going to be the automatic, like, no, if you're the Big 12, you get like BYU should get the bye week or whatever. So that's not necessarily the case.
As everything changes and we get into a situation where there is both confusion and anger about things that are subjective, I will tell you that there are very few things in products that are consumed or in entertainment that will create this amount of anger toward the product without harming the product in any way or its consumption.
Enhances it.
Or its customer base. Yeah. Usually in any place that I'm selling you anything, if the customers are this unhappy with the imperfections in something, it affects sales. It affects the way that it's consumed. All you guys are doing by complaining about it is caring. And that is the fuel to everything in sports. Whether you're applauding the Cowboys or you're despondent today because the roof is falling in their stadium, the thing that is valued most among customers is do they care? And all they show you when they complain about this is that they care more unreasonably about this than they do about almost anything else in their life when they care enough to complain.
I think it's all going to work itself out, and that's what I constantly tell myself when I encounter these scenarios in which like the SMU one, I think we can all see that happening. And I do think while it may not be a real problem for the SEC, by making it all the way to your conference championship, I do think it'll affect teams from the Big 12 or the ACC.
Well, this is where Jess is saying, how can you put a percentage on the algorithm if a human being's going to have to decide between I've got Georgia with 3 losses or I've got SMU with 2.
Right.
And a human being is going to make a made-for-television event of like, yeah, of course I want Georgia there. It's not even based on this year. It's based on the last 5 years. And I haven't thought about SMU since they were recruiting, Eric Dickerson with actual oil wells.
Wow.
They were offering him actual oil wells.
It's also humans are making the decision while conferences and pundits and all of these different head coaches and players are lobbying their case towards them all season long. I don't know if you watched Kirby Smart's interview after the Tennessee game, but he said on the side or like on the field in his post-game interview, like, this is the hardest environment to play in. I dare the committee to come down here and play in a game or something like that. Like, he was like already super fired up about the rankings, even though it's like this is like we haven't done the final ranking yet. Like, there's nothing to be that upset about after the second week of rankings. It's okay, Kirby. You guys beat Tennessee. You're going to be back in the top 12 now.
Georgia never left. I mean, they're in the playoff. I'm guaranteeing it right now. They never left the playoff. I know they're on the outside looking in, but that was just to make us talk about it.
Yes.
I mean, they're fine.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. But you know what? The SEC does have a prejudice in its favor. It's earned that over the years, right? The brand name schools have a prejudice in their favor. They've earned that too.
Sure.
If your choice is Georgia or Tulane for the 12th spot in the playoff, it's obvious you're going to pick Georgia.
You better take Georgia. Same with Miami.
And
right.
Same with Miami. And they would do better TV ratings.
But it is supposed to be merit-based. I thought one of the things we were trying to do with the imperfect measurements of how it is we arrive at a champion was for sports to be merit-based. I thought sports were supposed to be fairer than all other places. We could say life's not fair, but I thought sports were supposed to be fair. I think that's why we're always complaining about the officiating after every game that's played.
Yes, 100%. I think this is the argument that a lot of fans are currently in the midst of, is that are we basing the top 12 off of what you've done this season, or are you basing the top 12 of what will produce the closest spreads for the opening round game? So, like, if you have Indiana in the playoff because they won 11 games or 12 games this season, but the spread when they play Georgia is 10.5 points. Well, they can't be a playoff team. And it's like, well, that's not what – I don't think that's why we have the committee there. I thought that the committee was to look at what teams have done. Now, again, like, the problem is there is uneven scheduling. The conferences are ginormous. You're not typically playing the best team in your conference every year. But, I mean – that's why there are 12 people supposedly to try to like balance these things out and make the best choices. And we will find out if they can do that or not this year.
The mega conferences going without divisions have really complicated things, because it seems like this is going to be a problem going forward. Is you're going to have multiple teams gunning for a conference championship game that aren't going to have the space in their schedules to play one another. And without divisions, you're not legislating that. So it's a bit of a pickle.
So it hasn't happened yet, but I think I'm already ready for this to go back to just 2 teams. Like, just tell us the 2 teams that are playing for the national championship.
Whoever's
Bring back the
undefeated.
computers. Bring back the
let's
computers.
just have 2 teams, and then we only have maybe 2-3 teams upset about not making it to the championship, not 56 different fan bases thinking that they deserve to be in the top 12.
There really isn't a lot like this, where in boxing, gymnastics, the voting is subjective. It's not quite as clean as the scoreboard is the fact teller. And so this one is just going to be an eternal anger among sports fans that people who want it to be fair and merit-based are always going to lose to, hey, it's a made-for-TV entertainment thing. Like, it's made to make the customer happy. SMU, don't care that much that you're SMU because all of the biases are poured into what makes the best television product.
Right.
What gets me the most eyes, and I get why the purists, the people who actually care about college football the most, are like, really? You're going to give this to the people like Stugotz who still thinks Alabama's the best team in the country and that should be 12 teams in the tournament that have beaten Alabama?
And they will, because they've gotten that fan with SMU. They don't have me. I mean, if you want to get the most possible viewers, don't put SMU in there.
Okay.
I'm telling you, right? But give me Georgia, give me Mississippi, give me anyone other than SMU. That is a big responsibility of this committee to provide me with a playoff that I want to see.
Well, if you watch an SMU game, you'd probably be like, "Oh, this offense is pretty exciting to watch. Quarterback's pretty fun." But anyways,
SMU.
my thing about college football is that there's 134 teams in FBS. 128 of them, say, give or take a few, realistically probably can't win a national championship. And we put especially with the expanded playoff, we are putting so much emphasis on postseason and the national championship. And as a college football fan, for my whole life, the best thing about college football has not been who's going to win the national championship at the end of the year. The best thing about college football is the rivalries, is tailgating, is watching, players on your team get better over a season, watching, games with your friends. Like, it's all of the things that make college football separate and distinct from the NFL, where the purpose of the NFL season is who's going to win the Super Bowl. It is the biggest TV event in the world. That is not for my life been, and my team's been in the playoff twice and has been in a national championship
And
in
will
the
be
last
in again
10
this year.
years. Hopefully,
And every year.
Big game
Yeah.
against Army this week.
I love to see a left guard develop.
But I mean, if you like football, it's fun to see a player that your coach recruited as a freshman come in and get really. Notre Dame's seen it with Xavier Watts. This is a totally random example, but he got recruited as a wide receiver, switched over to safety, won the Bronco Nagurski Award last year, came back, and he's having an insane season as the defending best defender.
Do you not see the distinction between the way
football.
you care here, though and the way
Yes,
Chris
of course.
does? Because Chris
And
is
I'm not-
really.
I'm not
really
saying-
with how Stu cares, because
yes.
I mean, he's a Northeasterner that doesn't know really.
And I'm not saying I'm
Well,
right.
what does that
in-
have to do
Excuse me,
with it,
you don't
though?
know about college football.
I'm
No,
not
but I
saying-
know what I want to see. That's
Yeah, but what you
I
want
know.
to see is antiquated. It's built on this media machine that just rewards it. You want to go back to 2 playoff teams? No, thank you, because I know what conferences those teams are going to be coming from.
Mike, what I'm saying benefits Miami. It benefits Notre Dame.
Yes.
Those are the teams I want to see in the playoff
Not
every
as much.
year.
Not as much. Miami would benefit a lot more if they were in the Big Ten or in the SEC. Miami does have a brand awareness to it that SMU doesn't, because they're pretty much the same team this year. And the rankings don't bear that out. And the projections that always have Miami at number 3 doesn't bear that out. And it's pretty disrespectful to SMU, who just ran into a major conference and is now seemingly headed to Charlotte. I'm really enjoying this year. I think the games have been good. I love playoff eliminators like LSU and Florida had with LSU, because the committee always seems to reward them. I think the games have been great, and I'm really looking forward to a 12-team playoff in a year where I genuinely don't know what the best team in the nation is.
Right. Obviously, winning is important. That winning in the postseason is important. Winning a national championship is super important. But if everyone only cared about winning a national championship, there would be no fans of those other 120 teams. And those people exist. They appreciate and enjoy the sport. And so the hyper emphasis on just who is favored to win in round 1 of the college football playoff, I think, has taken away a little bit from how fun and exciting the regular season matchups between those other teams are. Now, I think it's great that we're paying more attention to the G5 schools like Tulane and Navy this past weekend, because that was a American Conference championship decider, and Tulane smoked Navy like 35-0, and Navy's quarterback got hurt. And I like that that's part of the national conversation now, because Tulane's going to have to play Army in the conference, and it's possible if Army beats Notre Dame this weekend, they could end up in the playoff, which is insane. But I think from an argument standpoint, it has been frustrating that it's turned into a sort of like, who's got the biggest brand? I just want to see North Carolina, Kansas, Duke, and UConn in the Final Four conversation after 2 weeks of playoff shows.
And I shouldn't be that dismissive of SMU. I've been surprised, and shouldn't be, that they would have the money to get in the game last year with great defense, this year playing totally differently than they played last year, because they've been able to keep up with the spending that keeps them competitive. So I shouldn't just dismiss them. But the way that Stugotz and I think Cody are doing this reputationally with the SEC doesn't really allow a lot of space to be surprised by new blood.
Here's what I think. I love the college football playoff at 12 teams. Love it, love it, love it. And the main reason is that fundamentally I agree with Stugotz. I want the brand names. I want the legacy schools, the Alabamas, the Miamis. But I also want the alternative. I want the Indianas. I want the BYUs, the teams that would have no chance if this were still a
Chris
Final
Cody
Four.
just threw his hands up in the air and screamed, "What is happening?"
I mean, so you want everyone in,
But
so
he,
it should
he
be more
gets
than
that.
12.
But he
He
does
gets
get
it.
it with the 12 team.
No, here's what I want. Here's what I want. Okay, if it's an NCAA Final Four, I want the three great schools, okay? I want the Duke and the North Carolina, but I also want a Cinderella in there.
Right, like
okay?
Army. Yes,
And in
yeah,
my Final 12, in the CFP, I want all the big legacy brand name schools that are going to get the TV ratings, but I also want the 2 or 3 Cinderellas, the Indianas, the BYUs. It's the perfect blend. And the fact that we're debating all this is wonderful for college football.
You should
It's
be
great.
on the committee.
I should be on the committee.
Yeah, I think the other thing about Indiana specifically is that if you're going to, take points away from them because their schedule wasn't very difficult. Well, they did play the defending national champions, and they beat them, and it's not their fault that Michigan sucks this year. It
And
doesn't have a
FIU.
quarterback.
I know, but Jess, their
And
strength of
FIU.
schedule is 106th
All right,
in the
we'll
country.
see.
Right.
We'll see in the
Let's-
next couple of weeks.
Yeah, like just
Well, we'll see
put
this
that
week for
point
them.
aside.
Yes.
They're on paper, their schedule looked more difficult before the season started, but you can only play the games on your schedule. They still have their hardest game of the season this upcoming weekend. But it's very difficult, I think, to make these points about like, well, this team's better than Indiana because X, Y, and Z, when Indiana, no one expected them to be this good this year. They are this good because their head coach imported a ton of transfers from his old school to Indiana. They've started meshing really well and playing really well together. And so putting any sort of like, it's impossible to do preseason projections for a team like Indiana this season. And so they're almost getting like penalized for not, having people know how good they were going to be. And so if you're going to do that to Indiana, like, it'll be interesting to see if that ever happens to an SEC team that cobbles together a bunch of transfers with a brand new first-year head coach, and if they're going to get discounted for it too, because it just feels like this is like a very unfair argument to make about a team that's been wildly successful this season out of nowhere.